Former U.S. President Bill Clinton was questioned behind closed doors on Friday by a congressional committee seeking answers in the Epstein files investigation. Clinton is not accused of any misconduct, and although he's acknowledged being an acquaintance of Jeffrey Epstein, he says he stopped communication with him at least a decade before Epstein was arrested on sex trafficking charges. Former U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton also faced questions under oath for about 6 hours on Thursday. She too is not accused of any wrongdoing. Here's some of what she had to say after her testimony.
I never met Jeffrey Epstein, never had any connection or communication with him. I knew Ghislaine Maxwell casually as an acquaintance. But whatever they asked me, I did my very best to respond.
We will discuss all of this later in the show, but we begin with two former models who've accused men associated with Jeffrey Epstein of sexual assault. Joining me now from Amsterdam is Thysia Huisman. The former Dutch model says she was sexually assaulted decades ago by a man who, prior to his death, was part of a French inquiry into sex trafficking and sexual assault allegations against Epstein. Also joining us from North Carolina is former Swedish model Ebba Karlsson. She says she was sexually assaulted by a man whose name has appeared over 1,000 times in declassified documents related to Epstein. He denies the allegation. Welcome to both of you to the show. Thysia Huisman, let me start with you. Let's go back to the summer of 1991. That's when you first met Jeffrey Epstein. You met him at a party in Paris. You were then an 18-year-old fashion model. What can you tell us about this first meeting with him?
It was at a party, and it was located at the apartment of my model agent, Jean-Luc Brunel. That's also the man who drugged and raped me. I met Epstein. There was this group of really old, rich guys from different nationalities. One of them was an American man. He introduced himself as Jeff. And around that group of men, there was this group of really young girls, and most of them were from Russia and other countries in Eastern Europe. And they were all really young, and I was barely 18, and the other girls seemed a lot younger. And they were all trafficked. They were all scouted by Jean-Luc Brunel, the model agent, to come to Paris. And there, you know, they were like sent to parties, sent to stay with these old men.
So, Thysia, what was the relationship between your agent, Jean-Luc Brunel, and Epstein?
I think they were good friends. It was in 1991, so that's a long time ago. But I've been a witness to, you know, the trafficking of young girls. That was already back in 1991. It was happening. But I think back then they were just good friends. Yeah. And I remember that Epstein really, when we had a talk, he said like, it's really important that a man as Jean-Luc Brunel, who's an important model agent, that he sees potential in you and you have to use that to your advantage. That's what I remember from our talk.
And the models that Jean-Luc Brunel hired, where did they come from?
I think a lot of them, especially those young girls who were staying with the group of men, were all from Russia, countries like Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, so Eastern Europe and Russia.
Okay, Ebba Karlsson, good to have you with us. You are also a former model, and you filed a criminal complaint in France accusing a man, a modeling scout, of sexual assault and human trafficking after you recognized him from the Epstein files. You saw a photograph of him in there. His name appears more than 1,000 times in these declassified files. Could you tell us, how did you manage to identify him? And after all these years, are you hopeful you'll get justice?
Yes, absolutely. That's my intention here, of course. How I identified him was very much thanks to a French journalist and to Anthony Mansoui, who contacted me via our lawyer in Paris, Claire Lejeune. And he said, I think I found the scout that you wrote about in your book, because I published a book 2018 about my story, about my, it's like a memoir, and part of that was also this story about how I was trafficked and raped and violated. And so I didn't know for 36 years who this scout was. I knew he had a false passport because I had discovered his passport when I was traveling with him. And so at the time, I couldn't charge him or prosecute him for anything because I didn't know who it was. So by the time that this journalist contacted me from Paris, he asked, can I send you some photos? And so he did, and I recognized him, and it was a shock. It was a great shock because I, for 36 years, always thought he had a different name, and that was Daniel Goldberg. And it obviously wasn't. And I got so shocked he was in the Epstein files. But I wasn't really surprised because of what happened to me and the people he talked about. So, of course, I want justice, not only for me, but for all the survivors. And for the survivors out there, they still haven't got a chance to speak up. They're still living in fear of coming forward. And that also might be within the statute of limitations, because right now my case is, as you know, it's not is prescribed. It's not valid for rape, but it is for human trafficking. So my hope is that as many women or boys, we don't know, but definitely women, models or not models, dare to come forward to speak up.
Yeah, this scout's name is Daniel Seard, and just for the record, he has denied the allegations according to a report in a British newspaper. Now, Ebba, are you aware of any other models who were trafficked and abused in this way?
Yes, I am. Right now, I cannot tell you who they are, but I know there are more and more people coming forward to speak up. As far as I know, right now, of course, I'm the only one who has pressed charges against Danielle, and we still haven't had any justice served. So we are really expecting we expect that the authorities take charge and that they do a thorough investigation of this. And all the accomplices that were related to Jeffrey Epstein, we're very grateful that media is, supporting on this.
Right, you say you're hopeful that the authorities take charge, but are you also fearful that these very rich, very powerful men may be protected?
Well, we most likely, because otherwise we probably would have had justice already been served, but we have to keep, with your help, with media's help and other organizations, we have to keep pushing. We have Victorious Angels, we're 16 survivors there, but we are going to keep pushing forward and demand that all the Epstein files are released, because it's, as we know, it's just 2%. So who knows what's going to be in those files, and it's crucial that we all demand this, because we have to protect women and children. These are children, and it's against human rights. So how can we allow these powerful people to continue this? It's just absolutely insane, in my opinion.
Thysia Huisman, you befriended Virginia Giuffre. She is now deceased. She's the woman who accused Prince Andrew, former Prince Andrew, I should say, of sexual assault allegations that he has denied. How important has Virginia been in exposing her Epstein connection and this scandal? And how would you describe your friendship with her?
Well, I think without Virginia, none of this would have been possible. She led the way for Epstein survivors in general. And we met in 2021 in Paris because I was the first victim of Jean-Luc Brunel to come forward. And then she was, I think, number 12 or 13 that came forward. And because of her case, that was not without... outside the statute of limitation, they could arrest Jean-Luc Brunel, and that was in 2020. And 2021, she came to Paris, and she lives in Australia. So finally, we could meet in person, because we had been in contact a lot, but always online. And then we finally met, and it was a beautiful moment, because I was so thankful to her, like what she did, you know, that she sacrificed so much to get this whole scandal, you know, outside. And it was difficult for her because she was in the media, she was labeled a prostitute. And in the beginning, when she came forward about Prince Andrew, and she has always kept on fighting. So it's such a shame that she's not there and not here. And yeah, I'm really sad about it. But I'm also happy that it's finally happening. You know, that there's finally movement. But it's really great, a really good step forward that the files are open, are out there. At least a small part, like Ebba said, it's just a small part. But now we want arrest, we want accountability. It's not enough, you know, that it's only out there.
Okay, Thysia Huisman, Ebba Karlsson, thanks to both of you for being with us. We turn now to the Epstein files investigation here in the United States and also developments in the United Kingdom. Joining me is Jacquie Luqman. She is a coordinator for Black Alliance for Peace DC, and also with us from London is journalist Afua Hagan. Thanks to both of you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Jacquie, let me start with you. Former President Bill Clinton, as well as his wife, the former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, have testified before Congress at this oversight committee. Hillary Clinton, we understand, did tell the committee that if there were any crimes committed, she was not aware of them. And people who were at that hearing say that not much was learned from that deposition. She was deposed for something like 6 hours. But the fact that former President Bill Clinton, as well as Hillary Clinton, have been subpoenaed, have been deposed, how significant is that?
Well, I think it is significant in regard to the fact that there is some kind of action, legal action, involving these files and what is in them and who is in them in this country, where we have not seen much of that happen compared to what is happening in the UK, for example. But I also think it's significant in reflecting a little bit of hypocrisy, because there's plenty that most politicians, most presidents in this country should have already been subpoenaed and investigated and put on trial for, war crimes in particular, in the case of the Clintons and Hillary Clinton in her role in the destruction of Libya and her joking about it. But I do think that there is some significance to a former president being subpoenaed for a crime of this magnitude in this country, even though I'm not entirely confident that anything of substance is going to come out of this hearing. But I do think it's interesting that the Republican Party chose the Clintons to subpoena and investigate when there were no Republicans that were called to testify and answer for their presence and role in this scandal under previous administrations. I think there's plenty to glean from this happening at all in this country right now.
Yeah, Jacquie, I should make the point that neither former President Bill Clinton nor Hillary Clinton have been accused of any kind of misconduct. But now the Clintons are saying, and Democrats in general are saying, they want President Trump to testify as well. And Democrats on that oversight committee say that he should be deposed immediately. President Trump has previously denied any wrongdoing. In fact, a statement from the White House some time ago said he had been totally exonerated on anything related to Epstein. Should he be deposed, subpoenaed, and testify to this committee, not only about his relations with Jeffrey Epstein, but also with Epstein's co-conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell, who's serving a 20-year sentence for sex trafficking?
Yes, absolutely. All of them, everyone who is named in these files should be sitting in front of some kind of committee answering for themselves. And this has been true for as long as the Department of Justice, under every administration who has had the files, has had the files. these investigations should have gone on long ago. Yes, Donald Trump and every member of the Republican Party, every corporate CEO, every financier, whoever is in the files should be made to answer for their involvement in these alleged crimes. The question, of course, is who is going to do this? Who is going to push this to ensure that the Republicans named in the files are called to testify? Certainly, the current regime will not do that, since they claim that Trump has already been exonerated, even though there's been no investigation into his involvement in the files. So, yes, he should be. I just wonder who's going to make him do it.
All right, let's go to London to Afua Hagan. Afua, great to have you with us. Welcome to the show. Let's talk about what is happening in the United Kingdom, especially that investigation into the former Prince Andrew. He was recently arrested on suspicion of misconduct in a public office. How serious is this?
I mean, this accusation against Andrew Mountbatten Windsor is incredibly serious. It implies that during his time as a UK trade envoy, that he gave sensitive government secrets to Jeffrey Epstein via email. Now, Andrew has long denied all the allegations against him, and he has been arrested and released while the investigation continues. So it's just an accusation at the moment. But it is a very serious charge. But I also need to add that it's one that's very difficult to prove. It has quite a high threshold for a charge to be brought against him. And so you had the police investigation. He was arrested last week on Thursday. The investigation, the search into two properties that he was associated with, Royal Lodge and House in Windsor as well. That search went on until Monday. And that's the police building their case, building their investigation to perhaps get to a point where they would want to make a charge. But I think it's also important that we mention that being mentioned in the Epstein files does not mean you're being accused of any wrongdoing. And I think it's very important that we make that distinction. There are thousands of people's names in the Epstein files, but not every single person who is named in the files has been accused of any wrongdoing. And I think when we're talking about people perhaps giving evidence before Congress or speaking to the police here in the United Kingdom, it's very important that we make that distinction between people who are mentioned and people who are being accused of something, and that is quite different.
Right, that is an important distinction that you bring up there, and we should remember that. Is there any chance that, or how likely is it, that his links to Epstein could be expanded into sexual allegations?
And that's a really good question. So the police here in the United Kingdom, various forces are looking into things like flight logs, so flights that were potentially taken, private jets, by Jeffrey Epstein, by Andrew Mountbatten Windsor into airports in the United Kingdom, looking to see who was on those flight logs. Now, if you had young women who were trafficked into the UK for the purpose of having sex with Andrew Mountbatten Windsor or Jeffrey Epstein, then perhaps those charges could be expanded. There could be an arrest. Now, there hasn't been at the moment, and the accusation that he was arrested on was just the misconduct in public office. But yes, that is certainly being investigated, and you could have those charges being leveled against Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. But that's all speculation at the moment. But forces are looking into the flight logs, so that may happen.
Okay, Jackie, as we're hearing, the way this case is being handled in the United Kingdom and the way it's being handled in the United States is very, very different. There have been charges against people in the UK. People have been arrested. How confident are you that those who engaged in criminal activity related to this case will face justice here in the United States?
Not at all. Not at all, because there has never been a period of time in the history of crimes against people, against children, against humanity committed by the powerful in this country. There's never been a time where those people have been held accountable for those crimes. I mean, as much as the accusations in these files are shocking and horrific to many people, and they certainly are, we have to remember that the founding fathers of this country, many of them were slave owners who did the things that are being exposed in these files to our ancestors and the indigenous when they came here. This is a long history of abuse of vulnerable children in the most macabre and disgusting and inhumane ways that people in this country have continued to ignore and prop the people who carried these crimes out: genocide, child rape, child slavery, and worse. They continue to hold these people up as the paragons of virtue of American ideology and American democracy. So while I understand, that in some countries like the UK, there is a legal action being carried out against those who are accused of crimes in these files, I don't have a lot of confidence that that will follow suit in this country, because the Department of Justice has had these files for some time before this regime. Nothing was done with those files then, but nothing was done about all of the crimes committed against indigenous people, African people, and other marginalized groups of people by the rich and powerful along these lines in this country. I wish it weren't so. And I would like to be proven wrong. I actually would like to be. But I don't have a lot of confidence that this information will change the way these kinds of crimes by the rich and powerful against the vulnerable will be treated in this country.
Okay. Afua, let's talk about Peter Mandelson. He was the ambassador to the United States, the UK ambassador to the United States. He's now being investigated. What's the latest on that investigation?
That's right. Peter Mandelson was arrested and then he was released earlier on this week. It's the same accusation of misconduct in public office. This relates to the time when he was the business secretary around 2010. And again, it's all about him leaking private government sensitive information to Jeffrey Epstein for Jeffrey Epstein's gain. That's the accusation leveled against him, misconduct in public office. Now, Peter Mandelson, member of the Labour Party, was also a member of the House of Lords, stepped down from the House of Lords earlier on this month. You're right in saying he was the British ambassador to the United States, appointed by our Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. He resigned from that position in 2025, Peter Mandelson, because of his links to Jeffrey Epstein. And Sir Keir Starmer having a terrible time recently because of Peter Mandelson's appointment to that position. Sir Keir Starmer saying that he was lied to by Mandelson about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. The cabinet secretary who worked under Sir Keir Starmer has been forced to resign, because lots of people are asking, look, how on earth did Peter Mandelson manage to get this appointment when his links to Epstein were known? We didn't know perhaps how deep they were. This recent dump of files has shown us in emails and in pictures how deep their relationship was. And people questioning how on earth Peter Mandelson could be appointed to this position when he had such deep and close links to Jeffrey Epstein. So Sir Keir Starmer really fighting hard to justify his position, saying that he was lied to by Mandelson, and that's how the appointment came about.
How much political peril does Keir Starmer still face? I mean, his supporters in the United Kingdom say, well, look, he's explained it, this is over, he's survived this. Has he survived this?
I'm not entirely sure. I mean, we're just off the back of a by-election here in the United Kingdom. An area in Manchester, one of our major cities, voted in the Green Party as their winner in that election. Second came the Reform Party, a right-wing leaning party, and third came Labour. And that is seen as a real indictment against Sir Keir Starmer and the government, that they are now third place behind a left-wing and a right-wing party. So perhaps some of that is reflecting on him now. You know, people taking to the ballot boxes and voting how they feel, and that's not putting the government at the top of the pile. So he may have survived that very difficult Prime Minister's questions when he was asked about this. He may have survived the week after when his cabinet secretary was forced to resign. But if a by-election is a kind of barometer of how the country is feeling, then his time or his days could be numbered, absolutely.
Jacquie, what about the victims and survivors in what we are hearing about right now? They've become more vocal, they've become more visible as well. It's taken a long time.
Yes, it's taken a long time. It's taken far, far too long. And the latest treatment of the victims in the hearing a few weeks ago with the U.S. official ignoring the victims who were standing right behind her and talking about the Dow Jones, the level of disrespect and dehumanization and dismissal of the victims of this entire racket, and the refusal to take seriously any attempt to bring to justice any of the people not just named in the file. We understand that everyone who is just named in the file is not implicated in crime. I mean, Stevie Wonder is named in the files, but he's named in the files in the context of the fact that he refused to perform in Tel Aviv and is not a friend of Israel. So we understand that we're not demanding that anybody named in the files be made to testify, but those whose communications reflect some involvement or knowledge with the crimes against these, at the time, children who are now adults, those people need to be held to account. And the accidental unredaction of the names of the victims and releasing them to the public, this government has done more to damage the victims, to re-traumatize them, to continue to punish them and marginalize them. But again, this is the culture of the United States when it comes to sexual violence, violence against children, violence against women. This is the way these kinds of crimes are treated in this country, which is why outside of this context, people who are victims of sexual assault don't report them, because this is the treatment they get. So the world is seeing through the response of the U.S. government to the release of these files just how the system works in this country, or doesn't work in this country,
Jacquie,
in regard to protecting women and children from these kinds of things.
Jacquie, I've just got about a minute left. Could this issue, the Epstein files, the legal implications, the political implications, could it become an issue in the upcoming midterm elections?
I think among the people it will be. I think it already is. I do wonder about the response from the administration, because all things point to a potential hijacking of the midterm elections. So it will be an interesting thing to see exactly how the midterm elections will play out, both in regard to results, but more importantly, in regard to whether there will be a midterm election at all.
Okay, and that is where we have to leave it. Thanks to both of you for being with us. And that's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington.